Daniel moved carefully down the palace hallway, the tray in his hands shaking a little from the weight of the silver jug filled with spiced water. The corridors of the alien palace twisted like a maze, lined with stone walls carved with glowing patterns. He had been warned never to wander off the main path, but the palace was so confusing that he could barely tell one archway from another. Sweat slid down his forehead. He was the only human servant here, and he knew if he made one wrong step, the aliens would notice. The jug rattled as he turned a corner. The torches on the walls flickered with green flame, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Daniel counted the doors, trying to remember the instructions. The third on the left, they had said, but when he reached it, the heavy wood door was locked. His heart beat faster. He couldn't go back empty-handed. Not here. Not in this palace where humans were already treated as clumsy animals. He looked around, saw another door just ahead, and thought maybe he had miscounted. He pressed the latch and pushed it open. The smell hit him first. Not the sharp tang of torches, but something soft and sweet, like crushed flowers mixed with smoke. The room was darker than the halls, lit only by pale crystals set into the ceiling. Curtains of silver thread hung from the walls, shimmering faintly as if alive. At the center was a raised platform covered in furs, and upon it a tall alien woman reclined. She rose quickly when she saw him. Her skin glowed faintly under the crystal light, pale with a faint shimmer like glass. Her hair spilled in silver waves down to her shoulders, and her eyes, large, golden, piercing, locked on him with fury. She clutched a robe of deep crimson against her chest, as if shielding herself. Her voice cut the air like a blade. "Wrong door, human," she screamed, her tone both furious and shaken. "You have defiled my honor." The jug slipped from Daniel's hand. It hit the floor, spilling dark water across the polished stone. He froze, his eyes wide. He hadn't meant to intrude, hadn't meant to see whatever sacred ritual this was. But her cry rang through the chamber like an alarm. He stepped back, raising his hands. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't know." The heavy stomp of boots filled the air. Guards burst into the room, tall, armored figures with weapons glowing along the edges. Their spears hummed with energy, and they pointed them directly at Daniel. He tried to explain, but the mistress, the woman, lifted her hand, silencing him. Her eyes narrowed, her face hard as stone. She pointed at him with a trembling finger, her voice carrying the weight of command. He crossed into the forbidden chamber. He has stained what must never be seen. His life is forfeit. The guards closed in. The spears pressed near his throat, so close he could feel the faint heat of their energy. Daniel's breath came fast. He dropped to his knees, trying to plead, but his words tumbled out broken, lost under the echo of her accusation. The palace's sacred order had been broken, and he was the outsider. The woman did not look away. Her hands tightened on her robe, but her voice carried across the chamber with a strange mix of rage and unease. Take him to the council. Let them see his crime. Let them decide if a human should be allowed to breathe after such defilement. Daniel felt rough hands grip his arms, hauling him up. His feet scraped across the wet stone where the jug had spilled. His eyes flicked back toward the mistress. For a moment, just a moment, her golden gaze lingered on him. Not only anger, but something else hidden deep, something uncertain. But then her expression hardened again, and she turned away. The guards dragged him out into the hall. The sweet scent of the forbidden room clung to his clothes, sharp in his memory. Behind him, the door slammed shut with a sound that echoed like a final judgment. He stumbled forward, forced by the pull of the armored soldiers, his mind racing. He had stepped into the wrong door by mistake, but now it felt as if he had walked into a trap from which there was no escape. Voices rose in the corridors as the news spread. Servants whispered. Nobles peered down from balconies. All of them stared at the human who had dared to walk where no one was allowed. Their eyes were cold, filled with scorn, as if they were already watching a dead man being dragged to his end. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to shout, to tell them he had done nothing but open the wrong door. But the mistress's scream still rang in his head, the way her voice had cracked with fury, the way she had called him defiler. In this palace, her word was law, and his word was nothing. The guards shoved him forward until the hall opened into a wide chamber lit by hundreds of floating lights. A great circular floor stretched ahead, lined with alien figures in heavy robes. This was no ordinary gathering. This was the council chamber, where the fate of lives was sealed. Daniel was thrown to his knees in the center. The guards stood behind him, spears ready, as the murmurs of the council filled the chamber. Above them, banners of the mistress's house hung, marked with a black symbol like a burning star. The chamber quieted. A booming voice spoke from the raised throne at the far side. A human has broken sacred law. The mistress has spoken. His crime is clear. Daniel lifted his head. His lips trembled, but he forced the words out. It was a mistake. I didn't mean. The voice cut him off. Mistake or not, the council will decide your punishment. Every eye burned into him. The echo of the mistress's cry still haunted the air. Wrong door, human. The words would not leave him. Daniel's knees ached on the cold stone floor as the voices of the council swirled above him. The chamber was vast, every wall carved with symbols of power, every seat filled with alien nobles who watched him like a strange animal trapped in a cage. Their robes shimmered with colors that showed rank and wealth, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The mistress stood tall near the center, her crimson robe drawn tightly across her shoulders. Her golden gaze burned into him with fury, and her words carried the weight of final judgment. This human entered the forbidden chamber, she declared, her voice sharp and unshaken. He laid eyes where no mortal should look. By our law, his life is forfeit. I demand execution. The nobles murmured, their whispers echoing like hissing snakes. Some nodded in agreement. Others leaned forward with eager curiosity. A human's death was no more than a spectacle to them. Daniel clenched his fists on the stone, fighting the urge to shout. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. I didn't know, he said, his voice hoarse. The doors looked the same. It was a mistake. Laughter rose from the council seats, cruel and mocking. One of the robed figures stood. His voice was deep and filled with scorn. A mistake? A servant who cannot follow orders is no servant at all. He has broken law. He has shamed the mistress. His kind is reckless. Let him die. The guards shifted, their spears humming as they waited for the order to strike. Daniel's heart pounded. His mind screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. He looked at the mistress, hoping to see even a spark of mercy in her eyes, but her face was unwritable, carved in stone. She raised her chin, every line of her body filled with pride. Then, from the shadows of the chamber, an old voice broke the silence. Wait. The council turned as one. An elder stepped forward, his robe dark and simple compared to the others, his eyes pale as ash. His steps were slow but sure, and when he spoke again, the chamber quieted. Our law is clear, the elder said, but our law also allows a chance. A crime of defilement may be answered not with instant death, but with the trial of honor. Murmurs rose again, louder this time. Some of the nobles protested, shaking their heads. Not for a human. That tradition belongs to us. He is an outsider. He does not deserve it. The elder's voice cut through them. Tradition does not bend to hatred. The law binds us all, even this human. His gaze turned to Daniel, sharp and heavy, as if measuring his worth in a single glance. Let him stand trial. Let him prove if he deserves his life. Daniel swallowed hard. Trial of honor. The words sounded almost hopeful, but he saw the way the noble's lips curled into cruel smiles. This was no mercy. This was entertainment. The mistress's eyes narrowed. For the first time since Daniel had entered the forbidden chamber, her certainty wavered. She turned to the elder, her voice low but dangerous. You would risk our honor by allowing this creature to fight? He has already brought shame. If he fails, it will be my name they spit upon. The elder bowed his head slightly. Then let him fail, and let all see it with their own eyes. Death in the trial will satisfy both honor and law. The mistress's jaw tightened. Her golden eyes flicked toward Daniel again, studying him like prey cornered by hunters. Then she lifted her hand. Very well. Let the human stand trial. Let him bleed in the arena, and let the people watch his weakness. When he falls, none will ever question my honor again. The council roared with approval. The guards dragged Daniel to his feet, their grips rough, their expressions cold. He stumbled forward, his legs weak. The nobles leaned over their seats, watching him with cruel delight. He was no longer a man in their eyes, only a spectacle waiting to happen. As they pulled him out of the chamber, Daniel's thoughts raced. Trial of honor. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it wasn't freedom. It was another kind of death. Still, something inside him, small but stubborn, clung to the elder's words. A chance. Even if it was meant to humiliate him, it was still a chance. The guards shoved him down a narrow hallway lit with flickering red light. The air grew hotter, thick with the smell of sweat and metal. He heard roars in the distance, the sound of a crowd gathering. His stomach tightened. They were leading him to the arena. Behind him, footsteps echoed. He glanced back and saw the mistress following at a distance. Her robe swept the floor like flowing blood, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. For the first time, Daniel thought he saw something beyond anger in her face, something sharp and uncertain, as if she too was bound by chains she couldn't break. But then she looked away, her chin lifting high. The guards stopped before a massive gate made of black iron. Symbols glowed across its surface, ancient and powerful. One of the guards struck the gate with his spear, and the doors rumbled open. The sound of the crowd burst into the hallway, thousands of alien voices rising like thunder. Daniel's chest tightened. His breath came short and shallow. He stepped forward, pushed by the guards, into the blinding light of the arena. The floor stretched wide, covered in dust and bloodstains. High walls surrounded him, and beyond them, rows upon rows of aliens screamed for battle. At the far side of the arena, a massive figure emerged. An alien warrior, his skin marked with deep scars, his armor dented and painted with victories. He carried a blade longer than Daniel's arm, and when he roared, the crowd roared with him. Daniel's legs trembled. He had nothing, no training, no weapon but his own will. The trial of honor had begun. The crowd's roar shook the arena walls as Daniel stood frozen under the harsh light. Dust swirled around his boots, dry and heavy in the air. Across from him, the alien warrior moved like a living mountain. His muscles bulged under thick armor, his scarred skin showing proof of 100 battles. The warrior's eyes glowed with a cruel fire, and his blade gleamed, humming with energy. He raised it high, letting the sunlight catch the edge. The crowd cheered louder, chanting his name. To them, this was not a trial. It was an execution. Daniel's hands were empty. His throat tightened as the guards shoved a dull, rusted blade into his grip. The handle was cracked, the edge chipped and nearly blunt. It was not a gift. It was mockery. The warrior laughed when he saw it, his voice booming like thunder. "Fight, little human," the warrior called out. "Let us see if your bones crack as easily as your voice shakes." Daniel gripped the weapon tighter, though sweat made it slippery. His heart pounded so loud it almost drowned out the noise of the crowd. Every instinct told him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The arena gates were locked. The walls were too high. His only choice was to face the giant before him. The horn sounded. The trial had begun. The warrior charged with shocking speed, his massive blade slicing the air in a wide arc. Daniel threw himself to the side, the weapon missing him by inches. The force of the swing hit the ground so hard it cracked the stone and sent dust flying. The crowd roared again, hungry for blood. Daniel scrambled to his feet, gasping. His legs shook, but he forced them to move. The warrior grinned, his teeth sharp and gleaming. "Run, human. Run until you fall, and then I will cut you in half." Daniel raised his dull blade in both hands. He swung at the warrior's arm, but the blow barely scratched the armor. The warrior laughed again, backhanding him with such force that Daniel flew across the sand and crashed into the ground. His ribs screamed with pain. His vision blurred, but he pushed himself up, spitting blood. The mistress sat in her high seat, her golden eyes locked on the scene. Her expression was cold, her posture proud, but something flickered in her gaze as she watched Daniel rise again. He should have stayed down. He should have accepted death, but he didn't. Daniel forced air into his lungs and steadied his grip. He remembered the elder's words, trial of honor. It wasn't about winning, it was about enduring. If he was to survive, he had to show them something no one expected from a human. The warrior roared again and charged. This time, Daniel didn't run. He sidestepped at the last second, slashing low at the warrior's leg where the armor was thin. The blade scraped across flesh, leaving a shallow cut. The warrior snarled, surprised. The crowd gasped at the sight of blood, even if it was small. Enraged, the warrior swung wildly. Daniel ducked, rolled, and narrowly avoided the deadly strikes. Each movement cost him breath. Each dodge scraped his body with pain, but he refused to fall. He fought with desperation, Not skill, but it was enough to keep him alive. The alien crowd, expecting an easy slaughter, began to shift. Their cheers turned into shouts of surprise. The warrior grew angrier with each miss. He raised his blade high for a killing strike, leaving his chest open for a moment. Daniel saw the chance. He lunged forward and drove his chipped blade against the warrior's side, right between two plates of armor. The blade did not pierce deep, but it made the warrior stagger. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat. A human had wounded their champion. Daniel's arms trembled as he pulled back. His lungs burned. His whole body screamed to collapse, but he held himself tall. He looked at the warrior, blood trickling from his lip, and whispered, "I won't fall." Not yet. The warrior bared his teeth, furious now. He swung with both hands, his blade striking Daniel's weapon so hard it snapped the dull steel in two. The broken shard spun across the ground. Daniel fell back, unarmed. The crowd roared with excitement, certain it was over. The warrior stomped forward, raising his weapon for the final blow. Daniel, panting and half-blind from pain, looked around wildly. His hand closed around the jagged shard of his broken blade lying in the dust. As the warrior swung, Daniel rolled beneath the massive strike and drove the shard upward into the warrior's thigh. The alien roared in pain, stumbling back. Blood spilled onto the sand. The crowd erupted into chaos. Shouts of disbelief, cries of anger, even cheers from those who loved the unexpected. The warrior dropped to one knee, his massive frame shaking. Daniel staggered to his feet, holding the shard like a dagger. His chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. He knew he couldn't last much longer, but he had already done what no one expected. The mistress leaned forward in her seat. Her golden eyes widened, just slightly. This human, weak and untrained, stood bloodied and broken, yet still alive against her champion. Her lips pressed together, and for the first time, she did not look certain. The warrior growled and tried to rise, but his leg gave way. He swung his blade one last time, desperate to end it, but Daniel ducked under the strike and shoved the shard against the wound again. The warrior collapsed, his blade slipping from his hand as the dust rose around him. Silence fell across the arena. A human had forced the alien champion to the ground. Daniel swayed on his feet, his vision swimming. He could barely breathe, his body covered in bruises and cuts, but he stayed standing. He raised his broken shard weakly, as if daring anyone to take another step. The crowd exploded in noise. Some screamed for his death, others shouted in awe. The mistress's expression darkened, but her eyes lingered on him longer this time, filled with something sharp and unreadable. Daniel dropped to one knee, exhausted but alive. Against all odds, the trial of honor had not ended in his death. And though he did not yet understand it, something had shifted in the palace forever. Daniel's chest heaved as he knelt in the dust, his hand still gripping the broken shard. The alien champion lay defeated on the ground, groaning in pain, unable to rise. The crowd's roar rolled over the arena like thunder, but Daniel barely heard it. His ears rang, his vision blurred, and every breath burned his ribs. Yet he was alive. Against all odds, he had survived. The mistress rose from her high seat. The crimson of her robe glowed under the arena lights. Her golden eyes locked on him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her silence was heavier than any words. Then, with a wave of her hand, the crowd quieted. She raised her chin high and spoke. "The trial is complete," she announced. Her voice echoed sharp and commanding. "The human endures. His life, by law, is spared." Gasps filled the air. Some shouted in outrage, others laughed in disbelief. A few even clapped their hands together in approval. The guards looked uncertain, their spears wavering slightly. No one had expected her to uphold the law for a human. Daniel staggered to his feet, swaying. The guards came to drag him away, but she raised her hand. "Leave him," she said. Her voice carried steel, and no one dared defy it. The guards stepped back. Daniel's eyes lifted toward her. He could not read her face. She looked at him not with pity, not with kindness, but with something sharper, like a hunter seeing prey survive the impossible. Later, he was taken to a chamber, not a cell, but not freedom either. It was a room with stone walls and a single cot. A bowl of water sat on a low table beside him. His body throbbed with pain, but he forced himself to stay awake. He could still hear the crowd, their voices ringing in his skull. The door creaked open. The mistress entered, her robe flowing like liquid fire. She dismissed the guards with a flick of her hand. They obeyed instantly, leaving Daniel alone with her. Her golden eyes studied him for a long time before she spoke. "You should be dead." Her voice was calm, but sharp as glass. No human should have stood against a warrior of the arena. Daniel coughed, wincing. "Maybe I should be. But I didn't fall." Her lips pressed together. She walked closer, her movements smooth and deliberate. The sweet scent of her chamber clung to her, filling the air. "You shamed my house by stepping through that door," she said coldly. "But now you shame my people by surviving. You are an insult twice over." Daniel met her gaze, his voice hoarse but steady. "I didn't mean to shame anyone. I only wanted to live." For the first time, her eyes flickered with something like surprise. She leaned closer, her golden gaze burning into his. "You fought like an animal cornered by fire. No fear, only desperation. Tell me, human, what gave you the strength?" Daniel thought of Earth, of the wars his people had endured, of hunger and cold, of endless survival in the face of stronger powers. He thought of the execution he had escaped in this very palace. Slowly he answered, "Because I had no choice. If I fall, I am gone. If I rise, maybe I see tomorrow." Her breath caught just slightly. For a heartbeat, her pride cracked, revealing something softer, almost curious. She straightened quickly, hiding it behind her mask of authority. "You live," she said at last, "but do not mistake survival for freedom. You are still bound. From now on, you serve under my watch. Every step you take will be under my eyes. One mistake, and you will beg for death." Daniel lowered his head, though his jaw tightened. "Then I'll make no mistakes." Her robe shifted as she turned away, but she paused at the door. Without looking back, she said, "We shall see, human." Then she was gone, leaving only silence behind. Days passed, and Daniel was given tasks within the palace. He cleaned weapons, carried messages, and moved supplies under the watch of alien guards. Everywhere he went, whispers followed him. Servants pointed, nobles sneered, soldiers mocked him. But none dared touch him, for the mistress herself had claimed him. At night, he often felt her gaze on him. She passed through the halls, always watching. Sometimes their eyes met, and he saw that same strange look, a mixture of anger and curiosity. It unsettled him, yet also gave him strength. But not everyone accepted his survival. In the shadows of the palace, voices of dissent grew louder. Some nobles claimed the mistress had lost her honor by protecting a human. Others whispered that she kept him for reasons more dangerous than law. The tension grew sharp as a blade. One night, while Daniel carried supplies through a silent corridor, shadows moved ahead. 3 masked figures stepped out, blades drawn. Their eyes gleamed with hatred. "The human should not breathe," one hissed. "Tonight we fix the mistake." Daniel froze, the weight of the box heavy in his arms. He set it down slowly, his heart pounding. He had no weapon, only his fists. The assassins advanced, their steps soft and deadly. Before they struck, a new voice cut the air like a whip. "Stand down." The mistress stepped from the shadows, her golden eyes glowing like fire. Her robe swept the ground, and in her hand was a long blade, sharp and gleaming. The assassins faltered, that fear flashing across their faces. "This human is mine," she declared, her voice thunderous. "Any who touch him, touch me, and those who touch me, die." In a blur, she moved. Her blade sang through the air, and one assassin dropped, blood spilling onto the stone. The others fled in terror, vanishing into the shadows. Daniel stood frozen, breath shaking. The mistress turned to him, her blade still dripping, her eyes locked on his, filled with something fierce and unreadable. "You live tonight because of me," she said softly, almost like a warning, almost like a confession. "Do not waste it." Then she was gone, leaving Daniel alone in the corridor, the echo of her words burning in his chest. Something had changed between them, though he could not yet name it. Daniel lay awake on the thin cot, staring at the stone ceiling of his chamber. Sleep refused to come. His body still ached from the trial, his arms still bore bruises from the assassin's attack, but it was not the pain that kept him awake. It was the memory of the mistress's blade cutting through the air, the sound of blood spilling, and her words echoing in the dark. "This human is mine." He could not understand why she had saved him. By law, by pride, by every custom of her people, she should have let him die. Yet she had stepped into the shadows for him, striking down her own kind without hesitation. His thoughts twisted in circles. Was he her prisoner, her servant, or something else entirely? The door opened with a sharp creak. 2 guards entered. their armor gleaming under the torchlight. "The mistress summons you," one said coldly. Daniel pushed himself up, wary, but followed without protest. They led him through the palace halls, silent, except for the faint hiss of torches. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of incense. Finally, the guards pushed open a pair of tall doors carved with golden patterns. Daniel stepped inside. The room was wide, lit by hanging crystals that glowed with soft white light. At its center stood the mistress, her crimson robe flowing like liquid fire. She held a staff in one hand, its head shaped like a burning star. Around her, nobles sat in a half circle, their eyes sharp with suspicion. The mistress spoke first. Her voice cut through the silence. "The council questions my decision to keep the human alive." She stepped closer, her golden eyes piercing Daniel. "They call him a danger, a stain on our honor. They demand proof he is worth more alive than dead." Daniel's chest tightened. He felt all the nobles' eyes on him, their stares like knives. He swallowed hard but stayed silent, not knowing if his words could help or harm him. One of the nobles leaned forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "This creature is weak. He has no skills, no power. He should be ended before his presence poisons us further." The mistress raised her hand, silencing the noble. "Weak? Then let us test him." Her gaze flicked back to Daniel, sharp and unrelenting. "You saved yourself once in the trial of honor. Now you will prove yourself again." Daniel's heart pounded. "How?" he asked, his voice low. She turned slightly, gesturing to a table at the side. On it lay strange weapons and tools, blades, staffs, curved hooks of alien metal. "You will train. You will learn. And you will stand against any who dare to challenge you. Until then, you live under my protection and my command." The nobles hissed in protest, but none dared speak against her openly. With a sharp gesture, the mistress dismissed them. One by one, they left the chamber, their robes trailing, their eyes burning with hate. Soon only Daniel and the mistress remained. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. Daniel held her gaze, though his body urged him to look away. "You do not understand what you have started," she said softly. "By surviving, you have changed more than your fate. You have made enemies human. They will not stop. They will come for you again, and every time, my honor will be tested." Daniel clenched his fists. Then why protect me at all? For a moment, silence hung between them. Her golden eyes flickered, as if searching for words she did not want to speak. Finally, she said, "Because you are not what I expected, and because I will not let them think I am weak." She turned away before he could reply. With a wave of her hand, she called in the guards. "Take him to the training grounds," she commanded. The next days bled into each other. Daniel trained under the harsh eyes of alien soldiers. They gave him weapons too heavy for his arms, drills too fast for his reflexes. They laughed when he stumbled, struck him when he faltered, mocked him with every breath. But he refused to give them satisfaction. He endured the same way he had endured the arena. Every fall was followed by rising. Every bruise became a reminder that he still lived. At night, he returned to his chamber, exhausted but alive. Sometimes the mistress appeared, silent in the doorway, watching him. She said little, but her eyes always lingered, studying him as if searching for answers. One evening, as Daniel sat on the floor nursing his wounds, the door opened quietly. It was not a guard. It was the mistress herself. She entered without her crimson robe, dressed instead in simple black silk. She looked less like a ruler, more like a shadow slipping through the night. "You surprised them," she said. Her voice was softer than before, though still sharp. "They expected you to break, yet you do not." Daniel looked up at her, his face bruised, his arms heavy with fatigue. "I've been breaking all my life," he said. "The trick is not staying broken." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. She stepped nearer, close enough that he could see the faint shimmer of her skin under the torchlight. For a long moment, she said nothing, only watched him. Then, with a sudden shift, she leaned closer. "Do not mistake my protection for kindness," she whispered. "You live because I will it, because your survival now serves me." Her golden eyes burned into his, fierce and unreadable. "But if you ever betray that, I will end you myself." Daniel met her gaze, steady despite the fear twisting inside him. "Then I'll give you no reason to." The silence between them thickened, charged with something neither of them spoke aloud. Then she turned sharply, her robe swirling as she moved to the door. "Rest," she said without looking back. Tomorrow, you fight again. When the door closed, Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His body ached, his mind spun, but one thought stayed clear. He was no longer just surviving. He was caught in something larger, something dangerous, and something that tied him unshakably to the Mistress. The training grounds echoed with the clash of weapons and the shouts of soldiers. Daniel stood in the sand pit, sweat dripping down his face, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The wooden staff in his hands shook from the force of the blows he had just blocked. Across from him, an alien soldier sneered, his weapon gleaming with a faint blue light. "You fight like a child," the soldier mocked, circling him. "You think surviving the arena makes you strong? You are still weak. You are still human." Daniel tightened his grip. His arms burned, his ribs ached from the last strike, but he refused to drop the staff. He had learned quickly that every fight here was more than training. It was survival. The soldiers hated him, and each drill was an excuse to crush him. Yet day after day, he endured. He stumbled, bled, and crawled back up until even the most merciless among them grew tired of seeing him rise again. The soldier lunged. Daniel stepped aside, swinging his staff low, knocking the soldier off balance. The crowd of warriors watching burst into laughter, not at Daniel, but at their comrade's stumble. The soldier's face twisted in fury. He charged again, this time reckless. Daniel ducked under the strike and jammed the end of the staff into his opponent's stomach. The alien doubled over, gasping. For a heartbeat, silence hung over the grounds. Then someone clapped slowly. Daniel turned his head. At the edge of the training pit stood the Mistress. She wore her crimson robe, her golden eyes shining in the fading light. The soldiers straightened immediately, their mocking grins vanishing. She stepped forward, her voice carrying across the grounds. "Enough!" She waved her hand, and the soldiers lowered their weapons. Her gaze settled on Daniel. "Come with me." Daniel followed her silently through the palace halls. Her steps were swift, her presence sharp and commanding. They stopped at a balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons hung heavy in the sky, bathing the stone towers in pale light. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, she asked, "Do you know why I saved you in the arena?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't understand any of this. You could have let me die. It would have been easier." Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder. "Yes, it would have been easier, but easy paths are for the weak." She turned, her golden eyes locking on his. "You endured where others would have begged. You rose where others would have broken. You showed the council that a human is not as fragile as they think. And that serves me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "So I'm just a tool for you." Her robe shifted as she stepped closer. "You are alive because I allow it. But do not think I am blind. Your strength unsettles them. It unsettles me." Her voice dropped, sharp and dangerous. "You defiled my honor by stepping through that door. Now every day you live, you bind yourself tighter to me. Do you understand?" Daniel met her gaze, steady despite the chill in his chest. "Then maybe I'll prove I'm more than a mistake." For a heartbeat, her eyes flickered, something like surprise, something like curiosity, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She turned back to the city. "We will see." That night, the palace stirred with unrest. Whispers carried through the halls like smoke. Some nobles demanded the human's death. Others feared the Mistress was breaking tradition. Rumors spread that assassins were gathering again, this time not in shadows, but in open rebellion. Daniel felt it the next morning. The guards who once watched him with contempt now looked at him with open hatred. Servants turned their faces when he passed. Even the soldiers who had mocked him seemed uneasy, their laughter replaced with cold silence. As the sun set, the Mistress summoned him again. He entered her private chamber, the same room he had stumbled into on that first day. The sweet scent filled the air, the silver curtains swaying faintly. She stood in the center, her robe draped across her shoulders, her golden eyes fierce. "They will move against you tonight," she said without preamble. "They believe killing you will restore balance. If they succeed, my honor breaks with you." Daniel's pulse quickened. "And what do you want me to do?" She stepped closer, her voice low. "Live. That is all. Live, and their shame will deepen. Live, and their fear will grow. You are my weapon now, whether you like it or not." Before Daniel could respond, a crash echoed outside the chamber. The door burst open, and armed figures poured in, their blades drawn, their eyes burning with rage. Kill the human, one shouted. Restore the mistress's honor. Daniel grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a ceremonial spear resting against the wall. The mistress moved beside him, her crimson robe swirling as she drew her blade. For the first time, they stood shoulder to shoulder. The attackers charged. Daniel's heart pounded, but his body moved with instinct. He blocked the first strike, shoving the spear into the attacker's chest. The mistress moved like fire, her blade slicing through two more in a single motion. The chamber filled with shouts, the clash of steel, the smell of blood. Daniel fought clumsily but fiercely, every strike fueled by survival. He stumbled, nearly falling, but the mistress covered his flank, her movements sharp and precise. Together, they forced the attackers back. One by one, the rebels fell until only silence remained. Daniel stood trembling, his hands slick with blood, the broken spear still clutched tight. The mistress's blade dripped red, popped her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. Slowly, she turned to him. "You fought," she said softly. "Not like a servant, not like prey, but like one of us." Daniel met her gaze, his breath ragged. "I fought because I had no choice." Her lips curved again, but this time it was different, less cold, more knowing. "And that, human, is why you are still alive." She stepped closer, so close he could see the faint shimmer of her skin under the moonlight filtering through the curtains. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then she sheathed her blade and turned away. "Rest," she said, her voice calm but heavy. This was only the beginning. Daniel stood in the quiet chamber, his chest burning, his thoughts spinning. He realized then that his fight for survival was no longer just his own. He was entangled in the mistress's fate, bound by honor, blood, and something far more dangerous, her choice to keep him alive. The palace shook with unease after the night of blood. Whispers filled the halls like a storm. Servants avoided Daniel, their eyes darting away, while guards gripped their weapons tighter whenever he passed. He felt the tension pressing on him from every side, as though the entire palace wanted him gone, but none dared touch him openly. They feared the mistress too much. She had drawn her blade for him once, and the message was clear. His fate was tied to hers. Yet that bond only made him more of a target. Word spread that the council planned to move against both of them. Nobles accused her of weakness, claiming she had been corrupted by a human. Their hatred grew, and Daniel knew the storm was coming soon. One evening, he was summoned to the council chamber once more. He walked under the heavy stares of armored guards, his heart thudding in his chest. The chamber was packed, every noble present. At the center stood the mistress, tall and proud in her crimson robe, her golden eyes glowing like fire. She did not look at Daniel when he entered, but her voice carried across the chamber, sharp and unyielding. "They demand your death," she said plainly. The words cut the air, making Daniel's stomach twist. She turned to the council. "You think killing him will erase what has happened. You think it will restore my honor. But you are wrong." A noble slammed his fist against the railing. "You defy us for a human? He is nothing. His kind is weak. If you will not act, then we will." Shouts erupted across the chamber. Some demanded his head, others called for her removal. Daniel stood in the center of the storm, his fists clenched, his throat dry. For a moment, he thought they would strike him down then and there. But the mistress raised her staff high. The chamber fell silent. Her voice thundered, heavy with command. "If you want his death, then take it, but you will take it from me." Gasps rippled through the nobles. Her golden eyes locked on Daniel, fierce and blazing. "If you want him dead, you will have to kill me first." The council froze. Even the boldest among them faltered. To strike her was to strike at the very heart of their law. The silence dragged until finally one voice rose from the back. It was the elder who had once given Daniel the trial of honor. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "You speak of weakness," the elder said, "but what I see is strength. A human stood against our champion and lived. He has faced assassins and endured. Perhaps it is not weakness that binds the mistress to him, but something you fear more: change." The nobles murmured, some in anger, some in uncertainty. The mistress lowered her staff, her expression unshaken. She gestured to Daniel. "Stand," she commanded. Daniel straightened, though his legs trembled. He met the stares of the council, his voice hoarse but steady. "I never asked for this. I never wanted your laws, your trials, or your honor. But I will not bow. I will not crawl. You can hate me, You can try to kill me, but I will not break." His words echoed in the chamber. The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. The mistress's eyes narrowed, but there was no anger in them, only something fierce and unreadable, as if she had been waiting for him to speak those words. The council broke into arguments again, but the elder raised his hand. "Enough. Let the people decide. If the human's survival is an insult, then let his death come in the open. If it is strength, then let it be known. Tomorrow in the grand square, the human will face his judgment, before the eyes of all." The mistress agreed with a single nod. She turned to Daniel, her voice low but firm. "Prepare yourself. Tomorrow, everything changes." That night, the city buzzed with anticipation. The grand square filled with banners, the people gathering to witness the human's fate. Daniel stood at the edge of the platform, his heart heavy, his body tense. Around him, the air crackled with hatred and curiosity. The mistress appeared beside him, her crimson robe billowing like fire in the wind. She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Do not fear them. Stand tall, even if they spit on you, even if they scream for your death. Stand, and you will shake them more than any blade." The elder stepped forward, raising his hand to quiet the crowd. "This human has defied death, defied the council, and defied expectation. Tonight, his fate is decided not by whispers, but by the will of all. Speak, people. Should he die, or should he live?" The crowd erupted, voices clashing like thunder. Some screamed for his blood, others shouted for mercy. The noise was overwhelming, a storm of rage and confusion. Daniel stood tall, his back straight, refusing to bow. His defiance, even in silence, carried farther than words. The mistress raised her staff, silencing the storm. Her voice rang clear. "You see him. You see a human who should have died a dozen times, yet still he stands. You call that weakness? Then you do not know strength." Gasps spread through the crowd. Some stared in awe, others in fury, but none could deny the truth in her words. The elder spoke once more, his tone final. "Then it is decided. By law and by voice, the human lives. His survival is no insult. It is a mark of honor." The crowd roared again, divided but unable to overturn the decree. Daniel let out a breath he had been holding, his chest tight with relief and fear. The mistress turned to him, her golden eyes softer than ever before. For the first time, she said quietly, "Perhaps the wrong door was the right one after all." Daniel's heart thudded at her words. The square erupted with noise, but he heard only her voice, felt only the weight of her gaze. He realized then that he was no longer just a servant, no longer just a prisoner of chance. He was bound to her by blood, by defiance, and by something far deeper than either of them could admit. The night ended with firelight burning across the sky, the city alive with voices. But inside the storm, Daniel and the mistress stood side by side, knowing the path ahead would test them both more than any trial before.